Hello, just before the podcast begins, I want to tell you about The Assassination. It's a new podcast series from the BBC World Service. My name's Owen Bennett-Jones, and I used to be the BBC's correspondent in Pakistan, and for years covered the story of one of the world's best-known politicians, Benazir Bhutto. Then she was assassinated. The Assassination is all about my 10-year investigation into what happened. There are already 7 episodes with more to come. Search for The Assassination wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to HARDtalk here on the BBC World Service with me, Zainab Badawi, in Nairobi. When it comes to politics, Kenya has a history of disputed and often violent elections. My guest in this exclusive interview is opposition leader Raila Odinga, who's gone a step further and claims he and not Uhuru Kenyatta is the president. He's gone and had himself sworn in as the people's president. It's been slammed as a treasonous act by the Kenyan authorities and rejected by the world. Given Kenya's volatile electoral history, is he not acting illegally, irresponsibly and trying to stir up tensions? Raila Odinga in Nairobi, welcome to HARDtalk.
Thank you, Zainab.
Be honest with me, do you really believe you are president of Kenya?
Zainab, don't I look presidential?
Well, you're wearing a smart suit.
I think I do. And the majority of Kenyans believe that I am their president.
The majority of Kenyans believe that you are their president. If you listen to what people are saying, for example, Chamgay FM radio, which is obviously supports the government, but nevertheless they say things like your so-called swearing-in ceremony is meaningless, whereas Raila Odinga's State House, this was a farewell party for you. That's what Kenyans are saying.
Well, a few Kenyans, like those ones, who will say that. But of course, it's just a joke they're making. They know that the occasion was a very serious occasion. It was aimed at ending the circus of elections last year so that we can then now move forward. So you don't just have to be in a state house as a president. As a people's president, we have a very important agenda that we want to push forward in order to bring this country back on track.
There is no constitutional basis, Raila Odinga, for what you have done, declaring yourself people's president, saying you want to set up a parallel government. President Uhuru Kenyatta is very, very angry with you. His deputy, William Ruto, has described your swearing-in as a comedy and drama. He says those hell-bent on continuing to create drama should know that they are on their own. You are on your own.
Zainab, I think really theirs is what you can call as a comedy. But what we did is based on Constitution. We made the Constitution and ensure that when Kenyans reach a situation like this, they have the power. Article 1 of our Constitution vests the sovereignty in the people. The people of Kenya have got the sovereignty. They can exercise it directly or donate it to their elected representatives.
Look, if that were the case and you had as much support as you claim you have, why did 3 of your 4 coalition partners in NASA, nothing to do with space, it's the National Super Alliance, the opposition grouping which you head, 3 of the 4 stayed away, including Kalonzo, your running mate. They don't approve of what you're doing. You're on your own.
They have explained very clearly. The 2 did not have to take an oath. Kalonzo said that he would take an oath at a later date.
But he didn't turn up.
He didn't turn up, and he has explained why he did not turn up. I don't want to speak for him. But what I'm saying is that their not being there did not in any way reduce the significance or the importance of the occasion. And they fully, I've said that they fully stand behind it and support it.
Is that the case? Because when you talk to people in Kenya, you know, informed opinion suggests that they didn't support you because they're relatively young. You're a man in your early 70s now, and they think, look, we've got a political future. We don't want to be involved in this act which the government has described as an act of high treason.
Zainab, they know very clearly that if we do not solve the dispute over the 2017 elections, there will be no 2022 elections. Because if they will get away with stealing and rigging the way they did this last time around, there is no guarantee that 2022 will not be rigged. So what we are trying to do is to bring to end electoral fraud by imposing what you call electoral coup on the people. It's basically a coup d'etat, when the people have voted one way and the government, because they have taken the electoral body hostage, then declare different results and then impose themselves on the people.
So I just remind everybody that, of course, there were two elections last year, August the 8th, and that election result was declared null and void by the Supreme Court because you challenged it. You said, look, there was fraud. And the government, President Kenyatta, accepted it reluctantly, the verdict, but he went ahead with it. October the 26th, there were a second election, which you decided not to run in. And then that went ahead and President Kenyatta won that election. The result was upheld by the international community. Former South African President Thabo Mbeki for the African Union said the result is good. The European Union, the United States, the whole world accepted the validity of that election result in October.
Zainab, the Supreme Court, in making a ruling, said that there were illegalities and irregularities that therefore made the elections of August 8th a nullity, the declaration, and ordered that the Commission should conduct elections in accordance with the law and the Constitution.
That's the case.
So we asked,
asked
the Commission to sit down with us and address the illegalities and irregularities before a new election is held, so that we don't go for a repeat of what had happened in August 8th.
But really, if you had challenged the validity of that election in August and the Supreme Court said, fine, let's rerun, surely you should have run in October. And if you weren't happy with the result, challenge it again in the courts.
What would you do in my situation when the chairman of the Electoral Commission himself, 8 days to the October elections, on a live television interview says that he is not prepared, he's not ready. The Commission cannot conduct a free and fair elections on the 26th of October. And one of the commissioners resigns, also citing irregularities, pressures from State House, saying that 4 of the 7 commissioners take instructions from State House.
Right, so you think that the reforms were not done and that's why you didn't stand. So yes. You're now saying, I am the people's president based on the results of the August the 8th election. So this was an election that you went to the Supreme Court to say, we don't agree with this election at all. And now you're saying to us, actually, I won that election. It sounds very contradictory, like you're just flip-flopping all over the place.
No, Zara, it's not contradictory. What the Supreme Court nullified was the fraudulent declaration by the Commission that Uhuru Kenyatta won the elections. They did not nullify the elections generally. Because you remember during the hearing, we had petitioned the court to command the Commission to produce the server, to open the server for verification. The Commission refused contemptuously to comply with that order. So they're in contempt of court.
Right.
What we have done, we have since have opportunity to access the server and produce the authentic results of August 8th.
All right, and you say that gave you 8.04 million votes, and Uhuru Kenyatta got 7.75 million votes in those August elections. All right, but look, let's look at your People's President claim. The international community, again, has said this has no validity. Musa Faki, the chair of the African Union Commission, has said that, criticised your so-called swearing-in, and he says he rejects all action that undermines the Constitution and the rule of law. The US State Department has said that what you did was not correct. The American ambassador here in Nairobi, Robert Godek, has also criticised your actions. Nobody approves of what you're doing.
First, the OAU is really in very bad light on the continent.
The African Union.
The African Union. Because the African Union has been defending despots and dictators. In the past, they used to come in military uniform, military coups. These days, they carry what you call electoral coup d'etats and to impose themselves in power.
So the African Union, you refute what they say. What about Robert Godek, the American ambassador here? You've been saying that you actually want him recalled because you're not happy with his statements.
Robert Godek has behaved very badly. Because as you remember, I've told you that 8 days before the October 26th, the commission chairman said he was not ready. Yet, a day before that repeat elections, the Supreme Court was not able to get a quorum to hear a petition requesting for a postponement because of lack of proper preparations. Yes, Mr. Godek, 2 days before, brings all the other Western diplomats and they go to a press conference to say that they are satisfied with the preparations made by the Electoral Commission.
So where do you go from now? You say you are the people's president. You have said we will work like a government and appoint ministers even if we have to run the government in exile. That's what you said on Voice of America on January the 18th.
I did not say we will appoint ministers. What I said is that we are going to be people's government. And what we mean to say, we have set it out very clearly. We started first by forming people's assemblies in various regions. And we have had basically meetings with the people's assemblies of the coast, people's assemblies of the central, of Western, of Nyanza, and so on. And these assemblies have passed resolutions. These resolutions are going to be taken to the People's Convention, which is going to be held.
When?
Shortly. We are going to actually release a timetable very shortly.
And who is in these People's Assemblies? Because the elections in October were not just for the president, they were right across the board for the National Assembly, for governorships and so on. And many members of your coalition, NASA, are serving as MPs and are serving as governors. They're not part of this parallel assembly and government you say you want to set up.
They are. What we're doing here is, I've told you, we're invoking the provisions of Article 1 of our Constitution. We are now setting up a People's Convention. Having then first taken oath as a People's President, then this People's Convention is going to deliberate on the resolutions that are coming from the regional assemblies on how they want matters to be handled. And the 6 critical issues which are coming up here. Number 1 is electoral justice. Number 2 is independence of the judiciary. Number 3 is a reform of the police force. Number 4 is a restructuring and strengthening of the devolution. Number 5 is a restructuring of the executive power. And finally, inclusion, ethnic inclusion in governance for this country.
So what are you going to do then? You set up this convention. What are you going to do? March on State House, National Assembly, and say, we demand these changes? What is your plan?
We will not go to remove Uhuru Kenyatta from State House.
You don't want to remove Uhuru Kenyatta from State House?
He can sit comfortable. We know how we are going to remove him.
So you accept him as president?
First, we will...
Do you accept he's president?
No, we don't accept. We don't recognize that presidency because we say it lacks legitimacy.
And he says you've committed high treason. Do you accept that you have committed a treasonous act?
No, at all, Zainab. I have not committed any treason. What I've said is that Uhuru Kenyatta does not have legitimacy because October 26th, less than 20% of the registered voters actually turned up to vote.
You've explained that. So do you want a third election?
We want another election.
When do you want that third election?
We are, according to our timetable, by August this year.
Why did your colleague, Senator James Orengo, say the state has declared war and we will not relent until justice is achieved? The state has declared war on you?
You can see the way the state is acting. It is acting completely contrary to the Constitution. It has actually set aside the Constitution. You see, they're not obeying court orders. They are arresting people, holding them hostage in spite of the court order.
These are your supporters, around a dozen, just over a dozen or so, including Miguna, your lawyer, and so on. But these are people who the government is questioning because they believe that they were complicit in a treasonous act. No government would accept a parallel government.
But a government must act within the law. Even if they committed any kind of a crime, they are still free until proven guilty through due process. So the government, under the Constitution, must produce you before a court of law within 24 hours of your arrest. The government has no authority to close all the media houses.
Well, they've reopened 2 of the 3 mostly
You ask
after a
why
week.
have they not opened all of them?
Yeah, well, the Citizen TV is pending.
But I'm saying that was illegal.
But what happens now is my point. You know, you say the state has declared war on you. What happens if your supporters don't get what they want?
You see, we are invoking, I've told you once again, the Article 1. So we are the people, and our supporters will not relent until justice is achieved.
Civil disobedience?
We will. Everything is going to be peaceful. But it's going to be a peaceful protest until justice is achieved.
A breakaway republic. I mean, you told the Financial Times in October, in Western Kenya, your stronghold, Nyanza, where the Luo people, your tribe, are based, you said the debate about self-determination is gaining currency.
That is true, Zainab. Today, if you go to a public rally in most part of this country, and you ask the question, people will tell you that they want self-determination, number one. Number two, if you talk about weapons, people will tell you, oh, we want weapons, we don't want to be killed like rats by the police. And then if you talk ill of the president. So I say that these are not good signs of a country.
But
these are
exactly
signs of a country in conflict.
Precisely.
And this need to be resolved.
We all remember what happened in 2007 at the elections there. 1,300 people were killed, 600,000 displaced. And there is an accusation against you. I tell you what the MP Moses Kuria says. He said this back in June. You want to set this country on a final inferno. Are you instigating violence?
You see that I have all the times resisted in attempts to use violent means to bring about change. In 2007, as you saw that the country was actually aflame, I'm one of the people who came forward and said, no, let us sit down and negotiate. I even offered and agreed to take the position of a prime minister and allow Mr. Kibaki, whom I had defeated in the elections, to go on as a
Well,
president.
exactly. Are you not acting irresponsibly, Raila Odinga, given that, as you've just said, you know, you've got this background of tensions, you've got a former Chief Justice, William Mutunga, saying on the 4th of February, I keep on having nightmares about the possibility of ethnic civil war. So when you throw your people's president and your parallel assemblies and so on, are you not fanning the flames of these tensions?
No, we are trying to use peaceful means to bring about the change that we want.
The accusation against you, for example, by President Uhuru Kenyatta, is that a lot of people are trying to take ethnicity and tribalism out of Kenyan politics. But he says you behave like a tribal king and that you do play the tribal card. Is that a valid criticism?
That is preposterous. Uhuru Kenyatta knows that, for example, my political base is Nairobi, which is fairly cosmopolitan. Where you're sitting is my,
it's your
my
constituency,
parliamentary
but your
constituency.
stronghold, where the Luo people, who you have a visceral attachment to, and they have a visceral attachment to you, as a former vice president, Michael Wamalwa, said of you, you are a fairly divisive figure because people who love you, he says, are indulging in Raila mania, and then there's the Raila phobia, people who don't like you, your critics.
Tell it this way. I beat Uhuru Kenyatta in the coast, by far. There, I beat Uhuru Kenyatta in part of eastern region. I beat him in the northeastern region. I beat him in western region. I beat him in Nyanza region. I beat him also in Nairobi. Uhuru only beat me in the Rift Valley and in Central, which is his hometown. Who is more cosmopolitan? Who is more accepted by the people of Kenya? It's me, not Uhuru Kenyatta. People
are now saying, where do you go from here? And you've got people who care about Kenya, like the UK High Commissioner Nick Haley, calling for a full dialogue between politicians, religious and business leaders and civil society groups to help create unity. And he adds that political conflicts and differences have destabilised the country. Why don't you pursue that kind of strategy and say, look, let's all come together, as Uhuru Kenyatta said in his inauguration in November, let us muster the courage and embrace the future and free ourselves from the baggage of past grievances. Go down that path.
That is the path you have suggested. We have been talking about dialogue in order to resolve this impasse, to resolve these contentious issues which are before us. Uhuru Kenyatta is pretending that there is no contention, that there is no crisis. He said he's only ready to talk about his development agenda, what they call the 4-point agenda. We've told him, we have much more serious issues to talk about before we talk about the development. We have the issues of electoral justice, which will not die away.
The point is, the people in Kenya, one businessman says, we're more concerned about the nation progressing and not stagnating because of the presidential election. We want the country to stabilise. The World Bank has said that the lingering political uncertainty can further undermine business confidence and stunt a robust recovery. You are relatively well off by Kenyan standards, but many people, want to see growth in this country. They don't want to see it held up with this political uncertainty, and that's what you're doing. You're prolonging the uncertainty.
We are not prolonging it. If it is resolved properly, then Kenya will move forward. You see, the last 4.5 years of Uhuru's presidency were wasted years. We gave him opportunity after the court ruled in 2013 against us. We gave him the opportunity, but it was all wasted. Look at the kind of corruption in the country, the wastage in the country, the kind of debt burden that he has imposed on the people. The cost of living here has soared so much that most people cannot even afford the basics that they require, like maize flour, which is the staple food in the country. Prices are so high. Unemployment, 40% of the youth are unemployed in the country. So the situation is very bad.
Yeah, and surely all that needs to be addressed and not have this comedy and drama, as Vice President William Ruto has said, of your parallel presidency, the so-called people's president. I put it to you that, as Uhuru Kenyatta says, when you have an election, there's got to be a winner, there's got to be a loser. You, Raila Odinga, as he says, are a sore loser.
That is really hogwash. How can I be a sore loser when I won in 2007 and left the loser to proceed on as a president? I lost in 1997 and accepted. In 2002, I supported Mr. Kibaki, the president. In 2013, I accepted the ruling of the Supreme Court.
So you're not a sore loser?
So I'm not a sore loser. So I am a gentleman. Most people understand that. Uhuru Kenyatta is a very bitter person. He's a person who is actuated with emotions. That's why he does not want any serious dialogue in order to resolve what I see as a very, very serious conflict in this country.
Raila Odinga, thank you very much indeed for coming on Hard Talk.
Thank you so much, Zainab.
Thank you.
Thank you.